Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear sisters and brothers. Welcome back to the Radio Resistance podcast. As always, I'm joined here by my co-host and dear brother, Zubair John. And today we've got a very special guest here with us. So before getting into it, Zubair John, can you do us the honors and provide us with a brief introduction of our guest?
Uh, yeah, sure. So we are joined by Sara Wahedi. She is the CEO and founder of Ehtesab, Afghanistan's first civic technology startup. Ehtesab has been providing near real-time security and city service alerts through the Ehtesab app to Kabul residents since June of 2020. And it's expanding to three major cities across the country by the end of this year. Earlier this year, she was named as one of Time Magazine's Next Generational Leaders and MIT Technology Review's Innovators Under 35, as well as the BBC's Top 100 Women for her work in democratizing access to information for Afghans. Sarah previously worked at the Office of the President of Afghanistan, responsible for supporting social development policy and projects across the country. She's also currently completing her studies in urban studies and data science at Columbia University. So, with no further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Sarah John. If you can, I guess, go ahead and start with your story, your experience in Afghanistan, and how you are here now.
Thank you so much, Kumail John, Zubair John, for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. Thank you again. So currently I'm in the States as a student. Even now at this age, 27, it's kind of weird to be completing my undergrad at this age, but I've had a very unorthodox trajectory in my life. So basically, currently a student at Columbia University and pursuing what I love. I began studying political science and found that it was not as technical as I would have liked it to be. I wanted to have tangible skills, and I learned that I had that desire when I went to Afghanistan. Moved back to Afghanistan in 2017, full time, to the horror of my mom, who had trauma, obviously, from Afghanistan. When we left in the early 2000s, she didn't want to go back to Afghanistan, and I think a lot of our parents can attest to that trauma. And she didn't want me to go there, but I always had that watan parasti. I always loved to give back to my nation, so I knew it was something that I wanted to do for a while. So before coming to the States, I was living in Afghanistan. I was living in Kabul. And at that time, I was working on Ehtesab, which is the startup that we're working on now, which is a civic tech startup focused on the bridging communication and access to information for Afghans, because it is a fundamental right. Access to information is now a UN Declaration of Human Rights right. And it's something that we believe Afghans have a right to. Here in the States, we have 911, we have civic information. You never question it. It's not a politicized platform, and we deserve the same for Afghans. So I guess I could start in 2017. So I grew up between Afghanistan and Canada, in Vancouver. And after I started political science at the University of British Columbia, I began working with some social development NGOs, integrating refugees into Canada. And it was 3 years, 4 years in total, where I've been working on research and integration policy. And basically, a consultancy firm found some of the research we were doing about integrating youth from crisis states. And then they asked if they could use our research in Kenya. And then one thing led to another, and they said, we noticed you're from Afghanistan. Would you like to do an internship with us? So I did that internship in 2017. And one of my projects with that consultancy firm was to interview the president's office in Afghanistan. And I did that for about 3 to 4 months. I was working on researching the work of NGOs and CSOs in Afghanistan in the context of refugees coming back from Pakistan and Iran. And at the end, I found out that the president's office was hiring through the United Nations for some technical positions related to refugee policy. So, long story short, I applied. I had four different interviews, and I'm really happy that it was through the UN because, of course, one of the issues that was very prevalent in the president's office was people who got those positions through connections. That was definitely something that I was very aware of, and I was so happy that I never had that issue. I got my job fairly, and I always made sure that I followed all of the rules. And it was an amazing experience to work at the president's office. I learned a great deal. Um, and so just working on social development policy with the World Bank, with the United Nations, different embassies, and was very happy there. When things pivoted for me was an explosion on May 8th, 2018. I hope I got the date right, but I think it was May 8th, 2018. Yeah, I was walking home from work, and there was an explosion on my street. And at that time, I was in a little bit of a bubble. Like, I didn't really understand how people got information. I think explosions were happening all the time, and we just knew that that was a part of daily life in Afghanistan. But it was the first time where it happened literally outside of my home, and it affected where I lived. And I had a lot of anger. I was just so angry that this is the most unstable city, probably at that time, in the world. And how is it that we don't have a 911 system? Like, how is that not possible? We had a 119, but that one was not updated. Sometimes when we were doing research about Ehtesab, when you would call 119, which was the equivalent of 911 in Afghanistan, they would take your reports and post it on post-it notes. They didn't have any sort of concrete database. When you would call and say, my house is being broken into, there was no system in place. And I needed to fix that. So I felt like I had an opportunity to kind of solve this gap in service, and that explosion kind of changed my life. Where I wanted to work on this initiative of how can we provide access to information for Afghans. So from 2018 up until 2021, I spent my entire time on Ehtisab, and a month before the country collapsed, I came to the States. So that's, I guess, the long-winded story of how I'm in the States.
Wow.
Interesting. Um, okay, that's yeah. Obviously, we're gonna ask. We have more
Yeah.
questions that we would like you to expand upon. But thank you for sharing that. Kamel, did you have? I know you were interested in the actual Ehtesab app. If you wanted to.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I mean, first, well, in relation to the Ehtesab app, if you could kind of walk us through a little bit of how the app works. You know, what exactly, as far as information, delivering information to, your common lay citizen. How does it work exactly?
Yeah, of course. So basically, the app is twofold. One is that it provides information for the user.
Mm.
So there's a near real time timeline which provides information about explosions, electricity outages, roadblocks, or anything other that don't fall under those main components. Um, so we send alerts. We have a team in Afghanistan. Everyone is there except for me, and we triangulate reports based on if there's been an explosion in the area, if someone on social media has posted something, and then we work on verification. Once we've been able to properly verify through two or three sources that something has actually happened, we send an alert to the phones. So it comes up as a ping. If you have the app downloaded, it'll send you an alert that there's been an explosion in this police district or what have you.
Yeah.
Then we also send updates throughout the day about how many casualties have occurred and things like that. The second component is that you can send a report. So if you see something, you can say something. For example, when we first started launching the app, we had really interesting reports. Like we had one from an area called Shara Koryo, where stray dogs, were attacking children. And someone sent us a report saying, "Can you talk to Kabul municipality about this because stray dogs it's become a problem in our area." We had reports about an illegal alcohol ring in Sharnau, where someone said that there was an alcohol ring in the city, and they were reporting corruption. So it was a really interesting way that people were using the application before the country collapsed. Um, so the point here was One is, how can I make sure that people get access to information that they need? Explosions, incidents that happen across the city, because at that time, diplomats, embassies, millionaires, contractors, they had access to real time alerts, but not the everyday Afghan, which I literally was like, what is this? Like, how can these elites who are not Afghan literally get real time alerts, but the Afghan who has a non boi, who's working, who's taking their daughter to school, who's a student, doesn't have access to that information? That is literally technological colonialism and doesn't make any sense to me. And I fought tooth and nail. We were literally getting UN reports. We were stealing them. We were hijacking them, and we were sending them to everyday Afghans. We were, using. There's a company called INSO, which sends real-time alerts, security alerts to like contractors and diplomats and things like that. We were also able to get like a in and start taking their messages and sending them to Afghans every day. So we were trying to figure out, like, how do we take back our space? And we have been managing Ehtesab for the last year and a half, the alert system. So when the country collapsed, we were like, we want to keep going. We don't want to give up. And we've almost sent, from what I know, we're between 90,000 and 100,000 alerts. So in the last year and a half, we've sent almost 100,000 alerts to
Wow.
our users. About everything from security to electricity to what have you. So that's how the app works. It also has a map where you can see all of the different incidences that have occurred. And yeah, so it's really about planting the seed.
Right.
For me as a technologist, I'm not trying to get thousands of downloads. It's about, how can I plant a seed of behavior in Afghan's minds? Because an Afghan doesn't know that they have a right to information, that they have a right to verify trustworthy information. So you have to build that seed within years. And that's the long-term game that we're playing here, is how do we change the mindset of people so they know what to fight for? If you don't know what to fight for, you're not going to rise up against factions like the Taliban, because you don't know what to fight for. So we want to tell them, like, look, you have a right to information. We're going to provide you that access, but you have to know the value of it. Because can you imagine what would happen if 911 shut down in America? People would literally go into the streets being like, I want to, like, if I need an ambulance, or if I need the police, I need to be able to call 911. I need to be able to trust that it's going to answer for me. Afghans don't even know what that concept is, right? So one part is a startup that provides services, but the second thing is, we're trying to shift mindsets through Ehtisab and through the initiatives that we create.
Well, no, I absolutely see the value in that, and that's wonderful. You mentioned the verified and trustworthiness of the information, as being something very important. How does that work? Of course, I understand with applications like this, there might be part of the technology that's proprietary, but how exactly, after someone sends a report, right? Uh, is there a process before this report is made public for the end users that who might be in the same locality or region?
So there's two types of ways that we provide information on the timeline. One is the ones that we ourselves research. So it'll be like, Tolo has posted that there's been an explosion, and then we see if Tolo has posted, or emergency hospital. We check a few different alerts. Those are easy. Those are simple to verify. And we say, well, once we have three verified publications, usually Tolo, Hashtasob, Ham Amaj, and maybe one UN group, then we post the alert.
Okay.
If it's from a user, I don't think we've actually ever posted a user report on our timeline, because they're very difficult to verify. But let's say someone says that there's been an explosion,
Right.
then we'll talk to we'll talk to connections we have with journalists or with experts and say, look, a user has said that there's been an explosion here. Can you help us verify? And then it's the same it's the same journey, but then we'll reach out to Tolo, and we'll reach out to other journalists and say, look, something has happened here. Can you verify this report? That's how the reports happen. But we have all of the reports from our users, but those are never made public because they're
Got it.
very difficult to verify. So we've had really weird ones. Like, for example, we've had the Taliban is raiding the home across my street. Those are difficult to verify because I will not put my team in danger to go and see, like, is this house being raided right now? But those are important data points for us in the future when we create reports. We're going to need all those reports from our users to say, okay, we've noticed a trend that in this area of Parwanadu, for example, there's a lot of house raids. So why are they happening? So those data sets are important for us, but for user reports, we don't send alerts on those. They might help us to find out information, but when we send an alert, it has to be very robust. It has to be like UN, Tolo, like a whole bunch of different verified news sources that then we send the push notification for the alert. But user reports, we very rarely actually post publicly.
Got it. Got it. No, that makes perfect sense. Um,
Uh, so I think in the introduction when I was reading that off, I believe it said that there is you guys are working on a couple of other cities, right? So currently it's Kabul. Is that right?
So we have expanded to monitoring reports in Jalalabad and Herat. So we've added two more, um, but we haven't really decided on the third city
Mazar. It's got to be
because
Maz.
yeah.
Where's Mazar at?
yeah, the reason is because the ground level verification process has been so bad.
Mhm.
There's just been such a huge brain drain where we're not able to really have on the ground verified journalists or people to corroborate reports. Herat and Jalalabad are easy because our team members had connections there, but it's also a matter of safety. People don't feel safe to be able to work with a group like us because Ehtesab has never publicly said that we're against the Taliban, but we work on something that fundamentally is against their psyche, which is democratic speech, freedom of speech, and the right to be able to gain information. So, people feel a bit hesitant to work with
Mhm.
us, which I understand. But we're doing Herat and Jalalabad pretty well right now. But obviously, we would love to expand across the country, but we're taking our time because for me it's about building trust. I don't want ever for someone to say, oh, Ehtisab is that platform where they always post fake news. Like alhamdulillah, I can knock on wood and say we've never ever had a problem with one unverified or fake report ever. Since we started in 2020, we've never had an unverified or fake report, and I'm proud of that, and that's what I want to keep. So yeah, we'll get Mazar soon inshallah, but we just want to make sure that we're perfecting each city as we go.
No, Nama Khuda, that's a very, very good point. You mentioned in regards to the reliability factor. But one question, and I actually wanted to ask this, but great. I'm glad that this came up first. As far as you said sharing, well, not necessarily being, anti-Taliban in a sense, but it is by nature. It is also right. So,
Mhm.
it, as far as the data and information that you are collecting, right? Is there a reason why, or are there entities that you have looked into sharing this information and data with to be able to assist with, you know, we're called radio resistance, right? So whether not affiliated with any specific resistance movements or anything of that nature, but you know, those who are doing something on the ground to combat, uh, the Taliban, right?
Mhm.
Has that been something that you guys have discussed and or
Well, so the I mean, I'll have to be honest, like the level of information that we have is not to the level where I think like the information that we get, probably the resistance groups would have had a long time ago. What we can do is really provide the base information for residents, which means like an explosion occurred, here's what happened. But for when it comes to very high intelligence information, we don't have the manpower to do that, to be honest. And second of all, this hub is available to everyone. It's a free platform, so it's not like we save certain information and we, publicize other stuff. We've never ever had the instance where, let's say we get a report where I would feel like a resistance group might need that information. They already know those things are happening, especially when it comes to house raids. They're aware that that's happening and they're already trying to figure out how to mitigate those problems. But when it comes to data sharing, of course, like that's why I moved Ehtesab from a startup to basically a nonprofit or foundation because number one, my goal is to be able to give back to my country. I don't want to make money off of it. Of course, before the country collapsed, we would have loved to be a startup and to be able to be sustainable. But now it's all about how can we give back to our country. There are groups that are selling data. That's why they're so big, is because they're able to sell data. I don't ever want to sell data. I feel like that's extremely inhumane and very opportunistic. So Ehtesab data will always be free. We've had researchers who've asked us to see our data, and we're happy to facilitate and let them know what they need from us as researchers. Um, but yeah, we're not that, like
I
high
got you.
intelligence security to be able to provide information for them. But of course, like, I mean, I'll be blunt. My personal experience, my personal position is that I'm against the Talib. I'm very anti-Talib as an individual, and I mean, we're happy to support any resistance groups, and we've made that very public for Ehtisab. Is we want to see a democratic and free Afghanistan, and that's why we believe in providing access to information, because it is a fundamental right. So whatever resistance group is going to be leading that, we're definitely more than happy to support those movements. But yeah, so we don't really have information that would be useful for them. I
No, I
think
got you.
if we did, we'd share it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. It was just some of those, like you said, the raids and things of that nature. But I just remembered with Azerbaijan's question that it's Kabul for the time being, for the most part, right? So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, completely understandable. If, for example, Ehtesab App were a thing in Panjshir or some other northern provinces or some areas that
Mhm.
Taliban activity is higher, and there's
Well,
no access to that information, I guess even then,
yeah.
right, citizen your common lay resident citizens would, that information would be useful or could be useful, but
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. So, well, one is, like I said, the goal is to have it countrywide. But the second thing is, I would I would want there to be access in those areas, and it is important for me that we have them. I think it's also about how do we make sure that especially with resistance groups, how do we make sure that we're not like sending an alert that they want to have secret?
that's
Like
right,
if they have an intel, or they have some sort of you know um, action in movement. We want to make sure that we're also not like putting them in danger.
of course.
But when the time comes, we will have those conversations with resistance groups and see where we can facilitate. But what I can tell you is, what you're thinking, we're also thinking about. In about a year, there will be some updates to what you're thinking about. Obviously, I can't share that right now, but what you're thinking about, we're working on it. So in a year, hopefully, inshallah, we'll have some updates about working in Pine Shade and other areas as well.
Okay, awesome. No, it's, we're really glad to hear that. And of course, anytime, if you guys need any extra set of hands as a developer or whatever, you can count on me over here. So,
Great.
the Zorajon, I think there was something before. I'm not sure if I had interrupted you. There was something you wanted to ask.
Um, Actually, so if this will be the last question on, I guess, the this app, since we spent a lot of time on it. I mean, it was
Yeah.
great. We learned a lot, and the more we know, the better, right? So just the last question was, would there be a comparison that you would make to, like, let's say in the US or even in the West, but specific, let's say in America, what's the equivalent of like an Ehtisab app other than 911,
Wait,
I guess?
before you go, Sarah, really quick, is it? Have you heard of or used this app called Citizen?
Exactly.
Would that be a good
Okay.
comparison?
In the beginning, yeah. So when the country collapsed, CNN, Fox, NBC, it was like Citizen. It was like, we have actually, there's an article in New York Post about us, and they were like, Ehtesab, the Afghan Citizen. And Citizen
Oh,
reached out to me, actually. So I spoke with Citizen last year, and we had a meeting, and they were just like, how can we support you? We've heard people connect you with us, because it was crazy. I mean, when Afghanistan collapsed, I mean, like, like we were speaking to basically every major news broadcast in the country, and yeah, everyone was connecting us with Citizen. So we spoke with Citizen, and it's exactly the same. When I speak to American or international platforms, I always say that it's like Citizen. Um, but I think the reason why Citizen didn't want to engage with us is because they probably want to expand worldwide, and they probably might see us as a competitor.
Mhm.
Then again, Citizen is like a massive, massive group. I think they raised like $60 million in first seeding, like their seeding round. So they're doing really well. But they did limit their conversations with us because I think they probably are like they're basically the same thing as us, but in like the the Asian or the Central Asian context.
Hmm.
And obviously, we would love to expand in the future. But yeah, so we have talked to Citizen.
Well,
We have been in contact with them.
one major difference, though, I would say, just to point out for those either unfamiliar with Citizen or thing, Citizen doesn't filter any of the user reports at all. As soon as a user reports, right, it's accessible to the public as well. So
Yeah.
there's less reliability there. What you guys are
Hmm.
doing with Ehtesab, I mean, it's amazing. It's reliable information, right? You're cross checking it with journalists and verified. I mean, going through sources to be able to verify that information. So, yeah, I guess.
Exactly. And also that's actually a great point, Kamal John, because I've said this, and I think Citizen might be upset that I said this, but in the West they kind of fetishize danger. They use flashy lights, colors, red, green, black, like alert. And especially in New York City, people get excited, like, wow, there was a stabbing. Or especially at Columbia, where I go, I hear sometimes people talking about Citizen where they're like, did you hear that something happened on our street? Oh my God, let's check the comments. In Afghanistan, the reason why some people ask me, why is it so simple? Why, it's blue and white. We're using very happy colors because Afghanistan, like Afghans, they're exhausted from war. I don't want to fetishize war. I want to make it like this is the information you need to stay safe today. That's it. That's all we do. We're very specific about what we send because my job isn't here to keep you on the app. I don't want you to stay on the app. I want you to get the alert and I want you to start your day, right? So that's the main difference with us is in the West with media and social media, we're so entranced by what happens in our cities. But in Afghanistan, I want to send that information to users, but I want them to make sure that they feel safe. Like, oh, okay, wow, thank you, Ehtisab. Thank you for letting me know. I can call my mom. I can call my sister. Great. And that's the reviews we get is thank you so much for helping me move around Kabul safely today. That's the goal. I don't want to keep people on the app. And Citizen, it profitizes on this is how can we keep people on Citizen app because they're scared of their communities. They're like, I'm going to get stabbed today. I'm going to, a building is on fire. I don't want to do that because if I could do that, of course I could raise a lot of money. But I'm not going to use my own people,
Yeah.
as a product. So the app is very simple for a reason is just get the information and go, and that's the service we provide.
Yeah, I think they call it the gamification, right, of these
Yeah,
applications.
exactly.
Yeah, just so Marjan said it was the last question. I promise this is a small, little, tiny question though. And of course, if you can't answer this, if this is private information, then I totally understand. But the daily active users, like how many users are there in Afghanistan? Um,
Right now, I would say, well, the difficulty is because we don't collect people's locations. Of course, it would help us with being able to track data better and things like that. We just made a decision for safety of the user not to ever track location. I can't say for sure how many in Kabul, but I could say that we have about almost 3,000 active users
okay,
a day.
okay.
So I would say that on average, 500 people open up our notifications when they immediately happen. But then you also have to remember that each Avon household has about 6 people on average in their home. So if 500 alerts are being opened, 5 or 6 of the people are being informed, and then they're informing others, and then they're informing others and sending screenshots to WhatsApp groups. So the dissemination is much, much higher. But we have sent almost 100,000 alerts, but I would say we have 300 active users and probably an average of 500 who open the alert immediately once we send them. So it's not as high as we would like, but also we haven't been able to promote the app. It's basically been word of mouth mainly because we've had two instances where the Taliban have detained our staff. We've had them raid our office. So it's a difficult situation to work with, but we have a strategy in place. We're working on really interesting stuff. So hopefully, inshallah, in the next year, we'll have some really big changes if we can just keep our safety intact.
Awesome.
Wow. Okay, so I guess we can discuss maybe some of more of your personal experiences in Afghanistan since you lived there. And again, our show is called Radio Resistance, right? And that's for a reason. So this was one of the biggest turning points like in our country's history, right?
Mhm.
Afghanistan collapsed to a terrorist regime,
Mhm.
and that's what basically prompted me and Kamil John to start such a podcast, because having these discussions is necessary. It's important. Whereas, sometimes when you just see the discourse like on Twitter or whatever, it could get very problematic, or everyone has their own opinions, and it's very hard to have like a civilized discussion.
It's
Um,
Mm.
toxic, bro. Stop avoiding being
all
all
right, I'll try
PC
to be nice.
again.
Yes,
It's pretty
it's
toxic. Yeah, if you ever see me deactivate for a few days, it's probably because of that. But no, so like, let's since you live there, how would you like assess, I guess, the situation when you were there? How did you see it? How was life? I guess the pros and the cons. Like, what was what would you say was great about the situation in Afghanistan when you lived there? And then also, what were some of the detriments, like the negative aspects that you think maybe could have led to what happened, right? The collapse of Afghanistan, the corruption and whatnot. Um, it could be two parts. So you could start with, I guess, the positives or whatever you want.
yeah. So I guess for positives, I keep trying. I mean, I don't get involved in these conversations on Twitter because I find that they're very relevant. But the ethnic conversation is so fascinating to me because my group of friends, I mean, different friend groups. One was the offices that I worked in. One was my own friend groups. Literally, we never spoke about which ethnic group we were in. It was like we are friends and we are all Avon youth. We all have our ethnicities. Like for example, we had our Pine Chidi friends who were extremely proud to be Pine Chidi, and we went to
Mhm.
Pine Chidi together. We were Pine Chidis, we were Pashtuns, we were Hazara, we were a whole bunch of a young group of Avon youth going to Pine Chid and enjoying time there and providing our prayers and our moment of silence for Ahmad Shah Massoud because we were proud of him as Afghans. And the same thing with Amanullah Khan. He wanted to have a democratic people's republic under a monarchy. Okay, the same thing happened with Ataturk, but it's about forward-thinking Afghans, whichever ethnic group they come from. So we were able to parse the goodness of all of our aspects, all of our different ethnicities, but we were under one umbrella. And we were never divisive. Like that's why a lot of my friends who were in Afghanistan, we literally talk about all the time. We're like, why is this the focus right now? Like, if the resistance group is against the Talibs, we all need to be supporting the resistance groups, and all of
Mhm.
us do, whichever group. Like, I'm half Tajik, half Pashtun, and I've been very vocal that if Ahmad Massoud is meant to be the leader, then we are all behind him. And there's a lot of Afghans who feel that way.
Mhm.
The divisive ethnic narrative that's happening in the diaspora, in my opinion, is because they've only seen each other and they've been in these enclaves where they're like, I this is who I am and I'm very staunch about it. But I can tell you from first-hand experience of living in Afghanistan since 2016 is that this was never a part of the conversation. It was about how do we collectively as a nation move forward? How do we build the Afghanistan of tomorrow? It was not about that's why I say the youth. I will say the youth like around like from 20 year like 30, the max I would say for this group 30 to 35, and everyone under that age. Everyone over 35 was, yeah, stuck in their old regime stuff. But for us it was like, this is the kind of Afghanistan we want. We want it to have to be a people's republic, and we want it to be democratic. We don't want it to be a Pashtun hegemony. And I have gotten a lot of flack for that, for saying that. But I do believe that if it needs to be a democratic republic, then it can't be this way. And there was a Pashtun hegemony in ARC, and people get upset by that, but that was the truth.
Yeah.
And I can say that as a Pashtun, and a lot of forward-thinking Pashtuns agree with me. So that was one thing. Was as youth we were shocked that this has now become like the narrative instead of like food, the resistance, getting to like collectively rising up against the Taliban. That's what shocked me. That was the main thing, and I think that is completely um, unillustrative of the Afghan context. It was literally never part of the conversation. Like, what ethnic group are you from? What ethnic group are you from? We never had those conversations. The second thing was we really wanted to move forward. Like all of my friends were entrepreneurs in different things, like startups, co-working spaces, cafes, restaurants, really amazing, interesting, innovative things. And I think people have an assumption that Afghanistan wasn't as uh, modern as it was. I think Kabul as an enclave was definitely very,
Yeah.
very modern, to a point where I still don't think people really understand. Like, I wish I could share more photos and videos, because literally, like, there was a restaurant called Prime Kabul in Sharnau, and you literally would have thought you're in Dubai. Like the food, the vibe, the youth, like you literally would have been like, I feel like I'm in Istanbul or Dubai.
Hmm.
And that was what everyone was working towards. That was Kabul for us. And even for youth coming from different provinces, it was fascinating for them, because they were getting this kind of like this image of Kabul and kind of modernism. And that it was this kind of trend. um, so I think that the heartbreaking thing for me is that the youth all had the same mission. How can we modernize Afghanistan? How can we build a curriculum? How can we move forward? How can we build innovation? How can we build sustainability in our economy? But it was not in our hands. We could do only so much. But it was really up to a few elitists who destroyed everything. And that's the thing that hurts us the most, is that we were the ones who sacrificed so much. And we were just like pawns in a political game. And
Mm.
that's the heartbreaking thing, is I wish people could have seen that Kabul, going to
Right.
bookstores, like even click.af, the Afghan Amazon. I was ordering everything on Click. Like, I never
Wow.
went shopping. I was ordering stuff. My friend Masi was the CEO of Click. And I'm sure in 1 year Amazon would have bought them, because literally they were
Wow.
doing 300 deliveries average every day in Kabul city. Like
Yeah.
a bookstore. There was a book, Cobble Reads. That was another startup providing book deliveries for Afghans. I was ordering like 10 books a week from them. Like stuff like that
Yeah.
no one would have heard about. And
Hmm.
that's the heartbreaking thing, is like that's all gone. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Uh,
oh, go ahead. It's alright.
no, no, no. I have a point to make, but it's not related. So I think you
Yeah,
can go first.
no, yeah. I just wanted to see if you could expand on what the connection between, at least from your point of view, the connection between, elitism, as you mentioned, and hegemony, as you mentioned as well, to the fall of Kabul. Because working at the ARG, I think you might have more insight than most others. Um, yeah. So
yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how to skirt around it. Like, I was lucky that I applied for my position and got it, like, alhamdulillah, the most clean way that I could.
Right.
I was interviewed by the UN. I did all of my checks and balances. I was happy with that. The rest of ARC was absolutely not the case. It was all about connections. It was all about whose brother, whose friend, that was all that it was. And that's the terrifying thing, is that there were people who were chosen ethically, who went through the civil service. Yes. But when it came up to the higher ups, a lot of it was connection. Like, I have friends who got jobs that literally had no experience in diplomacy, literally no experience in working in the government.
Just
But because they
nepotism.
had
yeah.
nepotism, exactly. They had a friend who was like, "Yeah, come work at ARG." They did. They were just, like, and now when I think about it, I would say, "Oh, who cares? Just one person, whatever." But then I was like thinking, after the country fell, like, how entrenched was nepotism truly? Because how could the country collapse so quickly? Like it just still boggles my mind that within, like, because we were working actively at Ehtesab, we were awake at 5 in the morning, like Talib's coming to Kabul. I literally laughed. I was like, I will bet, and I work in security. I was like, I will bet you $1 billion that the Talib. How can they come in? Literally in the green zone is the U.S. embassy, the German embassy, the Canadian embassy, the United Nations. How will the Talibs come in? Like by 10 a.m. they're sitting in Arak, literally in Ashraf Ghani's seat.
Mm.
And now in retrospect, I realize how horrific that nepotism was. And this is a position I think that a lot of people might not like me to say, but I truly still believe that Ashraf Ghani, as a leader, wanted the best for the country. Because at that time, a lot of the Pashtuns did not want Saleh, for example, to be in power, but he really wanted Saleh to be in power with him. I don't think he was an ethnic leader. I think he really truly wanted a responsible and truly visible government. But the people around him were very toxic, very, very toxic. And I think he himself realizes that now. I don't think he'll ever tell us that publicly, but I think he realizes how toxic his circle was and how they led to his demise. Because when I worked at ARC, he was very, very intense about half Dari, half Pashto. Like we would have cabinet members who would speak in Pashto, and he would stop them, and he would say, "No, you need to speak Dari." And if they couldn't speak Dari, then he would move on, and he would say, "Okay, you don't need to speak anymore." So I saw truly that he wasn't this Pashtun elite guy. He really cared about the Republic. But his circle, everyone knew how toxic his circle was. And I hope one day he will seek accountability for that. I hope he will be honest with the Afghan people about his mistake, because it was a very centralized group of a boys' club, essentially, of men who had way too much power than they should have. And he can't share the blame. The blame is his and his group, because that was a centralized structure, and that's what led to the demise. Is like, Dostum, Atanur, all these people came in too late. By the time they were a part of the narrative, the
Mhm.
country was collapsing. By the time that time, I think the skirmish was so into the city, into the country, that it didn't matter by then who he created alliances with. Um, so yeah, it's a very complicated situation, but people might not be happy to hear that. But it was a very centralized group of people who had way too much power, and um,
Right.
they need to be accountable for that.
Right, and actually, that's why I asked about this. While I do see the role of nepotism, you earlier mentioned, hegemony specifically, right? I think that I mean, they both go hand in hand, certainly, but um, the certain hegemonic policies that were in place, for example, like I don't take any offense when you use the word dari here, but my first language is actually called Farsi and not dari. That's just the name of an accent. But anyway, that's not. I completely agree with you guys as far as with both of you as far as the toxicity in relation to the discourse on social media. These are not priority issues. People discussing flags and so on and so forth, right? But at the same time, when we do want to discuss the future of Afghanistan, because I think the three of us here do or could agree upon the fact that the Taliban have an expiration date. The
Mm-hmm.
people, the vast majority of the common lay people in Afghanistan do not accept them as their leaders, right? So when we were discussing the future of Afghanistan, what was it that very famous quote of Einstein's where he says, "Insanity is making same mistakes and expecting different results." Right? From what it seems like to me, that there's a very big uh, group of our compatriots, whether it be diaspora or some, still there, who do actually want to repeat that same mistake. Do you want to be insane, right? Well, there are and they fear certain discussions, right? And I can't see any other reason but dominance or wanting themselves in power, like power struggle being the ultimate reason for the fear of such conversations, right? So for example, like, when we mentioned Ahmed Massoud, and so he's leading the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. And one of the essential principles, and a reason why I personally have hope in it, not only in his leadership, but in the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, as far as what they've provided as or proposed as solutions, is the central and most central theme as far as their platform, which is decentralization, right?
Mhm.
The decentralization of power and resources. So, yeah, if you could share some of your thoughts, what do you think about, um, centralization being a part of the issue, and then as far as, a centralized government, and then as far as the future of Afghanistan, right?
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you. I think for me, my dream is to have a representative democracy. There's equal seats for each province, respective of their population. Like it shouldn't be, the same amount of seats for every province, because in Badakhshan you have a certain amount of population compared to Pine Shade, and they should all be representative of the population. Like that's my dream, and obviously to have free and fair elections. A lot of Pashtuns will be upset that I said this, but I'll say it again and again, and I'm not afraid. Is that yes, there is a very specific group of Pashtuns who are absolutely threatened that they will lose power. Of course they are, because that's just, I mean, you've had two Pashtun presidents. Again, I will say that I've only witnessed one, the way that he worked, and I don't think he worked on the Pashtun hegemony. But were the people around him wanting a Pashtun hegemony? Absolutely, they did. Do they want that to come back? Do they want it to be exacerbated? Do they want it to be even more intense and somehow figure out how to remove the Taliban but come back into power in the way that it used to be? Absolutely, they will try to do that. I think it really depends on. That's why it's important to have these conversations. Is that perhaps I'm a little bit more Republic leaning, and then some people aren't. It's important that we have a conversation of the fact that we want the same thing. If Ahmad Massoud is meant to be the leader of the resistance, that's fantastic. If he wants to have a democratic, representative democracy, that's fantastic. That's my goal as an Afghan, and I'm willing to support whoever does that. And it's up to people like me who, I mean, I have a problem with the whole Pashtun thing because I don't speak Pashto and I never grew up with my Pashtun family. So obviously, I can't really speak for Pashtuns. But I hope, and I have told my Pashtun friends and
Mhm.
family, that it's up to you now to stand for whatever resistance is in power. You cannot, this can't be an ethnic thing anymore. It needs to be for the good of the Republic. And for me, I come from a very prominent Pashtun family. We're Baba Karkhel. And, my family has been in the government for many, many, many decades. But for me, I need to break that cycle and say, I want what's best for the Republic. And if that means like supporting a Tajik movement, I don't care. I really don't care. For me, it's about I want to see the Taliban ousted. So for me, it's having these really difficult conversations with the diaspora. Like, for example, I don't know his first name, but his last name I think is Paikhar. We obviously, like from the early days, him and I had a rift, and obviously we're not able to see each other's posts on social media. But I get told about them. And again,
It's
I
all of
tell
us
my
here.
fellow yeah, and I tell my fellow friends who are Pashtun, you need to speak out against this, and a lot of them do, and I'm really happy to see that they do stand up, but it needs to keep growing, that these very divisive, toxic, terrifying people who have come from the diaspora now, who have obviously lived very relevant lives there and have now tried to seek legitimacy in Afghanistan,
Mhm.
are destroying the republic. So as a Pashtun, are you going to sit there and watch him destroy everything you worked hard for, or are you going to stand against that? And I have been very staunch on that, and I will continue to do so, because I think he is a farce. I think he is an absolute a toxic character that is playing with the lives of Afghans because he has a Dutch or Danish whatever passport. He can leave whenever he wants to. Um, And that's why it's important that for those who want a democratic republic that is representative of our people, we need to see where that movement is heading to. And if that's Ahmad Massoud or whatever movement it is, this is now those people who work for the republic, because 70% of our population is youth. It's not these old elites. Like they're going to die off soon. They're going to be gone. So how are we going to collectivize and move towards a democracy again? So yeah, that for me, it's having those difficult conversations and putting it right in front of my groups, whether they're Tajik, whether they're Pashtun, having these conversations of, look, if this is what you want to go back home and you want to have your country be stable, you need to speak out against these idiots. You need to speak out
Mm-hmm.
against these toxic narratives that are happening. Instead of we're fighting about which parcham, which group, which you don't want the Talibs. That's number one. We're all on the same side. If you don't want the Talib, you need to get your priorities straight because we're losing a lot of good time. Like there's a lot of us right now who are working 24/7 on fighting for a democracy in our own secret ways.
Mm-hmm.
But it kills me to see brilliant youth fighting about such crazy, trivial things. Like, you're mashallah, you're a developer and you're in IT, and Zubair is a fantastic leader in our community. Like these are important assets we need to have to work together. Because if you see that, like Paikhar and all his group, like they're super together. They're moving in one nucleus, and everyone who's anti-Talib has chosen their factions. That's not how we work. We need to be together. And I hope that the one thing that I really hope to see with Ahmad Massoud is how can he bridge these factions? How can he get everyone together? Because right now there are people who feel like, oh, this is a mujahideen movement, and they feel very nervous. He needs to show up as a leader, and I'm waiting for that. I think he will. I think him talking to Hamdullah Mohib was very interesting for me, because for a while I was like, why would he do that? He Alhamdulillah Mohib is a khayan. He gave our country away.
Mm-hmm.
He was incompetent, and instead of saying I am an incompetent person, I'm going to step away from this role, he took the role when he shouldn't have. Okay, fine, that happened. But why did he speak to Hamdullah Mohib? I think it was to show that this is not a mujahid movement. This is a proper resistance movement. And that means he needs to speak with people of different groups to say, look, this is our movement. This is how the game is going to go. So I'm actually really happy he did speak to Hamdullah Mohib. I really hope he doesn't work with him. I really hope he doesn't work with him. But I'm happy that he's engaging in these conversations, because it shows that this isn't just a Painchiti movement. He wants the whole country to unite under this resistance. So I'm really interested to see what he'll do. I have a lot of high hopes for him, but yeah, that's how I guess I would see a hegemonic situation right now. They do want it.
Yeah.
They do want it, and to think that they wouldn't would be elementary. I think we do have to expect that will be wanted, and we're gonna have to fight together to stop that.
Yeah. No, thank you. That was a great. I mean, you answered the question and more that I did want to ask about. So thank you for that. But uh, part of one of our aims with this podcast is to also kind of clarify misconceptions and misnomers regarding the resistance happening on the ground in Afghanistan, right? And you did actually clarify towards the end of your answer there, but you had mentioned something about the NRF being like a Tajik resistance, right? I just wanted to clarify a little bit further that, and I know that your intention wasn't, to towards the end of your answer, I got you. It made complete sense to me. But one of the, as far as um, Amir Saib Ahmed Massoud, every time he's come out and spoken, whether it be in an interview or wherever, we've always seen that unity has been like the utmost important theme of what he's discussing. In fact, in the longest of interviews that we've gotten since the inception and formation of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, um, it was a relatively recent interview with BBC, and something that just stuck with me. It's my pinned tweet on Twitter was when he said that more than ever before today, the people of Afghanistan are in need of one thing, and that thing being unity, and that the
Mm-hmm.
NRF will never raise the flag of or promote any kind of discord. So I understand there's a lot of nuances in relation to this. I can understand why many would believe that the resistance is a Tajik resistance or an ethnic based resistance of some sort, but it truly isn't when we actually look at the
Mm-hmm.
actions of from top down or bottom up, however, whichever way we look at it. Those who are fighting, from the field commanders to the commanders, that they're getting their instructions and directions from, all the way up to the leadership, Amir Sab Ahmed Masood himself, right? We've always been emphasizing how important unity is, the fact that we all need to be united against the Taliban, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's just one little tiny point I just wanted to add
Yeah,
on.
and exactly, and that's why exactly I had said that the assumption is that it is a
Okay.
Tajik movement when it is actually
Mhm.
not at all. And that's why I keep having to explain on Twitter is like you're not understanding, either you're not listening to what he's saying or you're just seeing the flag and you've made this knee-jerk assumption, because it is absolutely not the case. I think people who believe in Pashtun hegemony, they are trying to use this as, oh no, it is a Tajik movement, when
Right.
it's not. That's why I am being more vocal about Ahmad Masood, and I'm very much watching his speeches and what he's saying, because that context of unity is important for all of us who have a voice, and all of us who are leaders in the Afghan community, to say, look, you need to listen to what he's saying, extract that information, and share it, disseminate it with other Afghans. And I will continue to do so, and that's why I'm watching, and I'm definitely keeping track of his movements and his narrative, because we all need to play our part in making sure that that narrative sticks. And there's no one more than me that would love to see this cancerous tumor be removed from our country. And we're going to do whatever we can. And yeah, and I'm glad that he is using these words, because they're important to hear. But yeah, it's again, it's all about different groups playing very strategic narratives, and they will continue to use this as an ethnic thing. And I'm doing my part to make sure that those are dismantled, to say, you obviously have a tasmim here. You want to basically make people scared, who are from maybe Pashtun dominant provinces, and, oh, this is going to be another mujahideen situation, when it is not. And there's like you said, there's literally no one in Afghanistan. I was speaking to a dear friend of mine who's in Kabul right now, and he was like, Sara, there is no one in Kabul who is happy with the
Mhm.
Taliban right now. Maybe some of the older generations who have from always been very patriarchal and very, Talib,
Mhm.
Deobandi, whatever. But the majority are like, what the hell is this? How do we get through this? So I have high hopes. I really do have high hopes, and I do hope that with more exposure, with more information, that people can get behind this movement. And I hope that his team and he will be strategic on this, because it's all about building trust. Like, for me as a technologist, I spent 4 years on building trust with my platform, and he needs to do the same. Is how can he build trust in his word in a very traumatized country? Yeah, so inshallah, we have high hopes, and we'll see what happens.
Inshallah. Yeah.
The only thing I would say, definitely, like he's when we have this terrorist group in power, right? It's like what are you gonna do? You're either gonna run with this, right? This is gonna be your choice. You either support this, or you look at the alternative, which is, and common sense would say, a resistance, right? To resist this movement. And who is doing that? Unfortunately, the former government is nowhere to be seen. They're out of the picture. So it's who is
Mhm.
taking charge and leading some sort of a resistance, and that is Ahmed Massoud. So um, he's not only denounced these, the issues of, for example, being only a Tajik movement or something like that. You yourself have said it's clear that it's not the case. But he's gone as far as saying that anybody from within from our supporters who makes certain claims that are ethnically driven and divisive, says they are not from us and we don't support them. I mean, when a leader comes
Mm-hmm.
out and is willing to put that much on the line to even possibly, to say such a bold statement, I think that's beyond, I mean, proof to say that he doesn't have some kind of an agenda here. That he is also one of these young people, just like us, in the same age group, that is, trying to bring change to this country and not trying to repeat these mistakes of the past, or some kind of a bring some sort of a corrupt movement or anything like that. So I think that's important, and I also think it's important when you made a couple of brilliant statements, and before you made those statements, you're like, I know people are going to get mad at me for saying such a thing, but I think it's important for you, and obviously you know this, but for anyone that's listening, to we should learn from that, and we shouldn't be afraid of saying what is the truth just because someone might get upset at you, whether it's your own ethnic group or regardless of which side you're on, right? So if I sit here and I say I don't
Mm.
support Tajiks saying such and such a thing, I shouldn't be mad at that, and I have taken flack for that on Twitter, and people have labeled me all kinds of things.
I just wanted to say it. Say it,
I,
Zamir. Say it. What
I've
are we
I've been
labeled
called a
as?
house Tajik, okay? Like, you're a house
Same
Tajik.
here. Same here.
Okay, if speaking the truth and being a decent human being means I'm a house subject, then I'm proud of that. There's no problem with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
just like how you mentioned some very truthful things with the Pashtun hegemony and the corruption. You're like, I might, I've received flack for it, but you bravely said it, and you said, I will continue to say it. That's what we need.
Yeah.
See, part of the reason why Twitter is so toxic is because there are too many people whose egos and their pride comes in the way, and they won't say those things, right? They won't. It's not only that they're afraid that they're going to get attacked, but their their pride and their nationalism comes in the way to the point where they're just racist. Certain people are racist and they say terrible things. I mean, you brought up. I don't even know why we brought. He shouldn't be getting this much attention from us. But that person,
Yeah.
what he just tweeted
Yeah.
today with this whole thing, we saw the Taliban desecrating the national hero's grave. I mean, disrespect is it's beyond disrespectful for the Taliban to do such a thing. Um, but what he puts out a tweet saying, if it were up to me, I would demolish the entire tomb site, and that's insane.
Yeah.
It's like, and then we have people
Yeah.
who are liking his stuff, retweeting his stuff, and then they expect us to take him seriously. But then that's also why you see this other reaction, this other extreme. I'm not justifying the other extreme, but I'm just saying that's part of the reason why it's so toxic, is because when you constantly have these kind of crazy people saying such things that like literally make you want to pull your hair out, um, then you
Mm-hmm.
have these other people saying the opposite extreme, crazy stuff that also make a rational person want to pull their hair out. It's like this has to stop, and I think that starts with just being honest. Um, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, but the thing is, and I, for a lot of my friends who have a lot of stress and a lot of my followers who reach out and kind of feel a lot of hopelessness about this, is there's definitely an
Yeah,
expiry date to the Taliban. People who are in power in the world who pull the strings literally think the Taliban is a joke. They're waiting to see what we
mhm.
Afghans do. The second thing is this guy also has an
Oh yeah,
expiry date. If he thinks that the international community is actually going to take him seriously, they don't. They think he is literally a joke, that he is a washed up diaspora who wasn't able to figure out his life in Europe and now came here to make
right,
something of himself. That's literally what most of the international community thinks about him. He won't be the one that the UN asks him to the meeting. If he's been so influential, how is it that literally no one in the international community has ever wanted to speak
right,
with him ever? Because he is literally a joke. So I always tell people that the way that you fight these movements is with intelligence and with patience, because he is literally going to expire himself with these kinds of narratives. Because, like Ahmad Shah Massoud, like I grew up hearing about his stories in a dominant Pashtun household. Like, he is the national hero. And like, like I said, it's interesting to see post August 2021 Afghan narrative, because every single household in Kabul respected Ahmad Shah Massoud. Literally, I told you, a group of us, 20 friends, went to his gravesite and paid our respects. And in that group, you couldn't have seen who was a Pashtun, who was a Tajik, who was a this. We were all Afghans paying respect to the
Right.
national hero. That's what people don't want to hear, but that's the truth. That's what he wants to change the narrative, but that's not what it is. So, for me as an Afghan, and I think the reason why for me it doesn't matter what I say, I don't care about angering different groups, my own group or not, is because I'm a very technical thinker. I'm not political. I don't think with emotion. I think
Yeah.
logistically. Like, okay, this is the case. There was a group of very ethnic driven individuals who had a lot of control in the government. Why is that
Yeah.
making people angry? That was the case. That was an observance that I had, that I
Yeah.
know was the truth. And the same thing with this guy is, it's all about the narrative. And instead of us using our intelligence to fight that, we're giving
Yeah.
him more uh,
Fuel. Yep.
attention. He will eventually, like I said, he can be a Twitter
Troll.
personality, but when it comes to making rules, when it comes to the back room where decisions are being made, he will never be added to those rooms. Literally, people know that he is just there as a lost, washed up diaspora. So, what I would say is, don't get upset about those. All of the people who feel like this is just infuriating, focus on what you
Yeah.
can do. Focus on how we can move forward. How can we go against this
Yeah.
narrative?
That was beautifully said.
I actually was really busy with midterms because I wanted to write something about the desecration of the grave, because I was in shock. I read
Yeah.
about it this morning and I was shocked. I literally didn't know the words to write, to say about the injustice that
Yeah.
has happened. I don't know what to say, because I can't believe that happened. And there's a photo of the Taliban memorializing Aman Khan. And my friends and I were making a joke yesterday, because we were like, if Aman Khan was alive right now, they would all literally be lined up on a wall to be killed.
100%.
The Taliban, Aman Khan would have accepted the Taliban. Are
Mm.
they nuts? Again, we see the ethnic
Yeah.
component
Yeah.
here, right? So it's up to Pashtuns here to stand up against this, to say, Aman Khan would literally think you're a joke. What are you talking about here? You would literally be murdered. Because if you truly know constitutionalism, and if you knew the monarchy, and if you knew Aman Khan, his relationship with Ataturk, if you knew all of these different things, you would know that the Taliban are playing a very interesting
Hmm.
ethnic game right now. So it's all about people putting those
Yeah.
emotions down, stepping away from their nationalism, their
Yeah.
ethnicity, and figuring out what they want to do. Like, do you want a republic or not? Do you want to have a home or not? Because I grew up in the West, and I know what it feels like to have your own country. I know what it feels like to go to Afghanistan, to hear your own zaban, to have your own
Hmm.
land, to say, this is where I'm from. And that feeling is so sweet. And that's why I want to fight, because I want to be able to
Yeah.
go back home. I don't want to live in the States. I don't want to live in Canada. I want to live on my
Yeah.
own land. And for me, that's why I don't care about the factions. For me, it's about who wants democracy, who wants
Hmm.
representation. That's who I'll fight for. And until we as a nation put down our egos, we're going to be
Yeah.
stuck. So I hope with these kinds of conversations that we're having, that we're able to fight back on these very toxic, divisive narratives that are happening. We need to work together. That's the only way.
No, that was very
Absolutely.
beautifully said,
Yeah.
Sarja. Um, yeah.
No,
Zubaida,
no, I
any
totally
questions for
agree.
Zubaida?
I
Yeah,
totally agree.
yeah,
Did you have a,
yeah.
were you gonna ask a question? If not, I could definitely add a few points.
I, I sense that. So no, go ahead. I don't have any questions at this moment.
No, well, I was gonna say, first of all, regarding that figure, he's not even there. He just visited for like a photo tour, like, just to gain some viewers. That's the part where you can't take people like that seriously. It's like, if you at least went there and you moved and you brought your life and everything there, and you're like, I'm gonna contribute to this country, even if you're, gonna say it's with this terrorist group. maybe you could at least respect that, like, okay, at least he put everything behind you. No, he went right back to freaking Amsterdam or wherever he is. Like, he's not there because he doesn't want to leave that luxury and those freedoms behind. That's the part you're these people are hypocrites. It's you're living in the freedoms and the luxuries of the West, and then you're supporting a fanatical terrorist, barbaric, Stone Age terrorist organization. So how can anyone like that be taken seriously? So then when we have mutuals on Twitter, if you see a mutual like retweeting someone like this and commenting and pushing and praising someone like this, that's when we also have to realize and say it's time to cut ties with these people, because this if you're gonna be supporting someone like this, I don't need to be friends with you, and you're not
Yeah.
helping our people, so you're not genuine, you're not sincere. That's what we need to do. I've cut off, I've removed followers or I've unfollowed people who just say garbage things, who are saying nonsense, and it's like I can't follow you, and I'm not going to like your stuff if you're not, genuine about our people and our country. So I think that's something we need to do. We need to focus on more. Yeah.
Yeah. And and like I said, I mean, this is probably the first time he came into my mind, and it was
Yeah.
because we were speaking about the diaspora. But yeah, like I said, that's why I literally don't even bat my eye on
Yeah.
these types of individuals, because they come and they do this kind of tourism, this kind of
Yeah.
political tourism, where they come and they try to put in their 2 cents and then they leave. I like it, it's just so interesting to me, because it's like, of course he's gonna say, okay, why would I give up my life in Amsterdam for literally a country with no structure or stability whatsoever right now? Of course he was going to go back. And it would be interesting to see how he would feel if the whatever European country he's from, if they took away his
They should. Yeah.
passport. He'd probably literally lose his
Probably have a heart
mind.
attack. Yeah.
So it's just it's and that's why I actually wrote a tweet the other day, because there was a young woman who came to Afghanistan and was sharing very, very tone deaf tweets like, wow, today I bought a cup of chai for 30 cents American, and Afghanistan is so great. And, children are out playing. And I was wondering, like, what are you doing right now? Are you willing to leave the United States forever and live there? What are you doing? And it is, why is the diaspora going back now? You didn't go back when Ashraf Ghani's government was in power, when the United States was there, when all these countries were there, but you're going to go back when the Taliban are there? How does this make sense to me? Because there are people who have passports who are able to, voyeur themselves, go to
Mhm.
Afghanistan and, you know, enjoy a few days there with the comfort of a passport, because they know that the Taliban is not going to make the mistake of detaining someone with an international passport. They're not going to play that game. And these people are too useless for them to engage in that kind of stuff. But what are you doing for the narrative of the young girls who can't go to school, for the people who don't have a job? Like, where is this lack of empathy, of reality? Do you understand what you're doing? Because the international community is looking for any excuse to get their foot out of Afghanistan. No more funding, no more aid, no more
Mhm.
development, nothing. Diaspora, a very intelligent person who grew up in the West, goes back and says, I can affirm that Afghanistan is fine. You're putting 39 million
Yeah.
people in danger. And it is a crime. It is literally criminal. And that's why I don't take anyone seriously. Like, if they have an international passport and they're going there for a vacation,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't take them
Disqualified. Yeah.
seriously. And it's
Yeah.
literally criminal. It is
Yeah.
literally criminal. Because if you don't live there, you don't wake up there, you don't have a passport to escape, your your narrative
Yeah.
is dangerous. It is literally dangerous. And we're seeing diaspora go there right now. And I just can't understand why. I really can't understand why. And it really breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart, because I don't understand. I don't understand.
Well, it's one of two things. If I were to guess, obviously this is not something you could really like. You still can't understand it, but if I were to give like a rational uh, analysis of assessment of why they're doing that, it's one of two things, and it's probably more of one. you're either an ethno nationalist, ethnocentrist, whatever you want to call it, right? Ethno fascist, where your race and your ethnicity comes, it's so important to you that the fact that the Taliban are like just they're predominantly Pashtun movement, right? 95%, whatever they happen to be, 95% Pashtun, right? The fact that they're there and they're in power makes you if you identify as a Pashtun, you're gonna say I'm gonna go support this movement. I'm gonna go support this group, even though they've killed tens of thousands of people via suicide bombings and roadside bombs and even though they don't let girls go to school and you being a girl you're going to still go and support this terrible misogynistic terrorist movement just because you identify with their race. That's see those are the points where I don't think we don't have to be shy about discussing ethnicity and race and stuff like that because those are the facts, right? And then the other reason could be like when we see people who are not from Afghanistan supporting the Taliban. These are usually extremist Muslims, right? The narrow-minded, ignorant Muslims who usually ascribe to either the Salafi, Wahhabist, or Deobandi type of thinking. And these are the type of people who will go and support or who will claim their support for this terrorist movement while living in the West. And this is literally, if you're a practicing Muslim, this is hypocrisy to the purest form of hypocrisy. You would have to answer
Yeah,
to God about this.
it's
Like it's terrible.
literally should. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
No,
Go ahead.
I agree.
Yeah, no, not to. Unless you guys wanted to speak any further on this subject, I did want to ask. I know we're. It's been over an hour, and I think we asked Sarah John for an
Yeah,
hour.
let's finish
So,
up soon.
okay,
No worries.
okay. So just like a question, from on a different subject. So, personally, I've never been as inspired in my life before by anybody or anything as much as I've been inspired by the women of Afghanistan ever since
Yeah.
the fall of Kabul until now. You know, as we've repeated a few times here, our podcast here is called Radio Resistance. I think it's that our women who are they've been on the forefront of the resistance from the very first day until now.
Mm-hmm.
Even in fact, when um, uh, Amir Saib Ahmed Massoud called upon the entire nation to rise up and fight against the Taliban, who were the first ones who actually
Took action.
took that responsibility, took action. It was the women, right? They flocked the streets from Kabul to Herat to all around the country. It was the women, right? And so I feel like this is actually the first episode we have with a woman from Afghanistan here. I'm definitely inspired by you as well, Sarah John. I'd like to just hear a few of your thoughts in relation to both the situation generally for of women in Afghanistan, and also, yes, your thoughts on the I guess the relation between um, or the women's resistance, be it civil and in the form of protesting, or, for example, what happened quite recently in Badakhshan with the women who were not allowed to go enter into the universities just due to
Yeah,
color. They were wearing burqas or the niqab of the new Taliban 2.0 style burqa, right? But it was just they had some colors on it. It wasn't all black, right? So yeah, if you can share a little bit of your thoughts on that with us. And
yeah, of course. Um, yeah, I completely agree. One of the first movements, and I think still to this day, the main movements that we see, the protests, is women. And I mean, so I'll give an anecdote as to why this is happening and why this is so entrenched. This is more than about the Taliban. This is our own patriarchal society. So recently, I've made this the mission that at Ehtesab, the majority of our interns that come in and those who work for us need to be women. Like my goal is 60% women on the team. So we recently had a young girl join us, and I hadn't met the team yet. My colleague was leading all these interns, and we found young women who were basically driven about doing something for their country. They wanted to give back. They were young grads, And I had a message from someone who said, "Hi, Sara John, can I call you?" And I thought, well, it was one of the interns. And I said, "Actually, I'm in a meeting right now, but I can call you back, or you can send me a voice clip." And they said, "No, no, okay, no worries." And I said, "No, it's okay. Just send me what's wrong." And then they asked me, like, "Does this girl work at Ehtesab?" And I said, "Who are you? Why are you asking this question?" And they said, "No, tell me. Like, first of all, I'm the CEO of
Yeah.
the startup. I have a guy who's messaging me about a girl who's working for my startup." And he said, "Oh, I'm her boyfriend, or I'm her fiance, and I need to know why she's doing what she's doing at Ehtesab. What is Ehtesab? Can you tell me about it?
Okay.
What is this app?" I was shocked that this guy had the audacity to get my number somehow and message me about what his girlfriend or his fiance does on a daily basis at Ehtesab. Like, he had that much of an ego to reach out to someone that he literally doesn't know. And this girl is working from home. Her identity is sacred. She's not even able to work. She's not even able to intern at a tech startup without someone literally monitoring her movement. And he said, "She is the love of my life, and I must know all of her movements." And I was thinking to myself, like, how are we gonna expect our men to get up when they think that women are literally products to monitor on a daily basis? This young woman, this young graduate, is not even able to have the agency to go and do an internship without having her movements tracked. So I wasn't shocked that this happens. I wasn't shocked that the men haven't risen. It's because men, especially Afghan men, have always wanted the women to have, a couple of notches on their heads because they were getting a little bit too independent. They wanted more education. They wanted to work. They wanted to lead. And their fathers and their brothers and their kakas and their mamas were like, hold up a little bit here. And that's why we see silence in our men, because they're threatened. They're threatened by the women. And this is what kills me is you would rather women sit at home
Mhm.
than stand up for your nation. You would rather not collectively rise up together because you're worried about our women being strong. Our women are Muslim women. I'm a Muslim. That's my fundamental value. And the majority, we're an Islamic republic, the majority of them are also Muslim. That is their inherent belief. But they also have a right to to study and to work. The Prophet, peace be upon him, his wife was literally an entrepreneur. She was a fantastic businesswoman. And that's why we see men literally, you see videos of Talibs beating women with guns. And men are just standing there, like 20, 30 men who could literally take this Talib and beat him up, but they're not going to. And this is because this was happening in Kabul way before the Taliban. You would see women getting harassed, you would see women getting harassed in workplaces. And that's because we have a very, very misogynistic culture.
Right.
And we have to deal with those things before we can assume that our men are going to rise for us. They took Iran 40 years for their men. Like, look at the men right now. A woman gets attacked by the Iranians, the Iranian police. Like, the men are standing up and being like, "Dude, like, I'm going to stand up for this woman." Our men aren't doing that right now. So what is it going to take? I don't know. But to see the women standing up, even though they're getting beaten, they're getting arrested. We just had another activist arrested again, four of them. Like, it's incomparable to me. It is incomparable to me that these young women who have nothing, no guns, no weapons, they're fighting in the streets for our country. And their fathers and their brothers and their kakas are just like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, just like Farkhonda
It's
as well, right? It's
Yeah, it's Farkhondan. Exactly. And Farkhondan was found out. All the Islamic scholars all agreed that she never did anything
That's a shame.
wrong. She just had a question. Like, literally, like an ilm, she had the right to ask a question, because that's Islamic law. Like, I'm studying Islamic law at Columbia right now. You have a right, and it's important for you to discuss with your leaders, with your imam, about questions about Sharia. And she did that. And she was killed for it because of people who probably have never
Right.
read the Quran. Probably they literally never have read the Quran. And they killed her for it. And she was an Islamic scholar.
right. What
We have very entrenched, deep issues that like way worse than the Taliban. You know, like they're literally warriors. They're literally warriors, and it's a shame. Like even my own family, the men in my family in Kabul right now. Do you think they're going to go in the streets? No, they're not. They're not going to do that.
You know, I was going to see if I were to play a little devil's advocate, I might get labeled as like a what do you call it, a misogynist or something.
uh,
But I was gonna make a point, but then you made a point saying that this stuff was happening even before the Taliban. So then I was like, all right, I'm just gonna shut up. But what I was gonna say, I was gonna say maybe the difference, see, where maybe in Iran the men have that luxury to be protesting and beating up cops and stuff, where in Afghanistan the security is the difference is we're dealing with like terrorists, right? Blacklisted terrorists that are suicide bombers. So I was just gonna say maybe that some of the men that don't want to go protest, it's because that they're afraid of getting taken, you know, kidnapped and stuff. But then the women are doing it, so then you can't really say
Yeah,
you
I know.
can't
That's
really,
what I'm saying. The women are
yeah, yeah. But at least,
so difficult.
sorry, go ahead.
No, this is the thing, is that if the
Yeah,
women weren't out there protesting, then
right.
we could have this conversation. But the fact that these young women with no guns, no nothing, are out in the streets, who are definitely getting arrested. I mean,
Yeah,
4
yeah.
were arrested the other day.
No,
They're
the
taking
men.
that risk, even if they don't want to be
Yeah,
arrested
yeah. No, the
either.
men
You know,
yeah.
definitely. Like I can't sit here and say like they should be doing this or that. But no, they should be defending their women for sure. That's for sure. And the men should be fighting back in general. I think the people of Afghanistan should say enough of this terrorist regime. But of course, sitting in the you know, it's easier said than done. So I do appreciate the men who are up in the mountains, at least resisting against the
yeah,
Taliban. They are setting.
Lit,
of
lit,
They
course,
should be an example for the other men to at least, if you can't, like, if you're not
yeah,
going to come shoot, you know, come into war with us up in the mountains, at least go protect your women in the streets.
yeah. I
yeah.
wanted to just say, like, literally the only two things, the only light I see at the end of this tunnel. I do see a light, and the only reason I see this light is one, the women of Afghanistan, and two, our
Mhm.
resistance
Yeah,
fighters. You know, the two of these combined with one another, because they're also fighting for the same values. They're fighting
Oh,
for
of course.
human rights, for women's rights, right? Um, uh, I see that as the only, light, and within all of this
hundred
darkness that
percent.
we're entrenched in at
Yeah,
the
I,
moment.
I, I completely agree. And it's for me, I'm a very observing person. If I'm going to see women in the street, I'm going to give them
Yeah,
all the attention. Anyone who on Twitter is saying, like, it's so easy to talk the
yeah,
talk. It's very difficult to walk the walk. That's why when people just tweet and they try to have the narrative through their words, and they can say a lot of very fluffy things, I don't listen to them, because I'm like, look at these women. They're in the streets fighting. And you're going to try to use Twitter to be a leader or to bring change? No. Like, these are the karamans, whether they're in the mountains or whether they're in the streets. They have the right to say what they want to say about the kind of Afghanistan they want to see. Because everyone else is, yeah, it's like you said, it's easier to sit here and say what we want to say, but they're the ones who are actually
yeah,
making the moves. They're the ones out there in the streets. They're the ones protecting the 20 years of change and growth within women in Afghanistan. You know, our men aren't. So let them lead. Let them pave the way, because the rest of us aren't. And of course we can't. And like, I definitely would be arrested the second I arrive in
yeah,
Afghanistan, and I've been told that. I don't think I can really do much if I'm arrested. So probably that's not going to be a very, beneficial thing for me to do, is just to go to Kabul and just get arrested, because I
right.
will. So that's why, of course, I'm trying to do everything I can from here. But that's why I'm saying, like, if you're going to listen to anyone, listen to the women, listen to the women activists, engage with their platform, uplift them, uplift their voice. Who cares what the people are saying from sitting from home? Like, listen to the women. They want to go to work. And that's why I'm saying all this diaspora who are going there and shifting the narrative from these women protesting to their, look at my chai and look at my amazing
Yeah,
vacation. It is literally criminal. Like, stay home, live your comfy life here. Let them lead the narrative. You're literally washing it away because people are like, wow, let me look at this person's amazing trip to
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What about the women who are dying, the women who are being arrested, the women who can't work, who can't, go back and pursue their dreams? Like, I work with young Afghan women. I support them and I mentor them with English. And they're literally chronically,
Hmm.
deeply depressed that they can't go to school, that they can't live their dreams, and it's just shocking to me that some of us can be so selfish. Some of us can be so selfish, and we have no life there. We're not willing to give up our passports. We're not willing to give up our lives. And then we're going to go there and just distort 39 million
Yeah.
people's lives with a couple of tweets. Like, these tweets are huge. Like, the international community looks at these tweets and they're like, this Afghan from California went to Afghanistan and had a fantastic time. Wow.
Feeding into
They,
the narratives that others, foreigners, are telling us, right? There's a civil war going on, where they're like, no, no, there's actually many of us who are united against the Taliban,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Afghanistan is a
yes.
certainly divided country right now, but yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, John.
No, I completely agree. And that's why I think having these conversations are important to push back on those. Is listen to the people on the ground, uplift their voices. If you're going to go to Afghanistan, go there quietly for whatever you need to be doing, but don't use it as your 30 seconds of fame.
Yeah.
Well said.
Like,
Very well said.
Very well.
yeah.
Yeah, and just a small point to add here, reiterating kind of what we're both are all in agreement on, but in an article I just recently read, I remember the author made a really good point on how no single individual or group owns the narrative pertaining to the realities on the ground in Afghanistan. And, I completely agree with that. That's a true statement. But the only narratives that we should be concerning ourselves with are is the women of Afghanistan, the women of Afghanistan, what they are saying, and we should amplify their voices. And two, uh, this is a personal, thought and belief of mine, of the resistance, those who are actually, and when I say the resistance, I mean the real on the ground resistance led by Amir Saib Ahmed Massoud, fighting against the Taliban. Because it's only with these two things that we'll be able to truly see an independent, free Afghanistan in the future. One where there's a hope of a brighter future for the women of Afghanistan as well, because as was earlier mentioned, uh, many of the human rights violations pertaining to women in Afghanistan is not just the Taliban issue; it predates the Taliban as well, right?
Mhm.
Misogyny and
Yeah,
all of that. So yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I can make
Definitely.
just one last point, and I think we'll close it here, unless Sarah John has anything to end it with.
Of
So
course.
the point that you made, where you said, "Who are you to, like, we should listen to the people there. Like, we shouldn't sit here and try to dictate the narrative or to say who you should or shouldn't listen." What I find funny is that when I support the resistance, right? Because the resistance is fighting for values that I have here in America, right? That I've been blessed with, right? Which is the freedom of speech, the freedom of pursuing an education, democracy in general, right? Security. I'm not going to support a terrorist organization. It would be hypocrisy, right? But when I sit here and I support people who are fighting for those rights, they label me as a hypocrite. Like, you're sitting here and you're supporting them for more war or whatever, but then you're sitting here with the same luxuries and democracy and the freedoms that I have, and you're supporting a terrorist organization. So who's actually being the hypocrite here? And then they might say, well, no, I don't support the Taliban. But then those people will spend more of their energy bashing the resistance, roasting the resistance, day and night. Every other tweet you'll see certain people, NRF did this, NRF, when it's all fake. First of all, just accusations and just things that they want to just to smear this group, right? But then once in a while you'll see something about the Taliban. But if you're spending most of your energy fighting against people that are fighting for those values that you have here, then you're being a hypocrite. It's like then you're actually supporting the Taliban because you're fighting the group that's fighting them. Why would you do that? So that's just one
Mhm.
point that I think it's very important for people to understand, whoever's watching this, that if you're doing this, you really need to reflect and think that, like, people will realize that people are not dumb. They know what you're doing and you're being a hypocrite. So if you're hiding behind a
Mhm.
fake profile or a profile without a photo, maybe show your face, and stop being such a tough guy. I don't know. That's These people are just pathetic. It's really sad
It's
that this is what they're doing, and they claim to love their country and stuff. I don't buy it.
Yeah.
it's definitely frustrating. I think my strategy has really been to fight the narrative with very strategic, very analytical, proven
Yeah.
points. I think I very rarely post emotionally because I think the reason why, like, alhamdulillah, thankfully people take me seriously as a
Hmm.
voice of reason is I follow evidence and I follow the truth. And I remember when I first publicly wrote about Ahmad Massoud, I didn't have a lot of flack because of it. And I think it's because of two parts. One was I had already established myself as a voice of reason, and I was not going to. I've never been, connected with a specific ethnicity group. Pashtuns have hated me. Tajiks have hated me. Hazaras have hated me. I've always, been very staunch about positions against whoever is wrong or right or whatever. So I think once I had said, I'm very, very, I'm looking forward to and feel very positive about Ahmad Massoud's leadership. A lot of my friends who are Pashtun or who are predominantly very pro Pashtun were like, "Oh, this is really interesting." And I think that that's what needs to happen is a lot more voices of reason need to speak out against this. And I think it needs to be met halfway, where the NRF and the resistant groups and their leaders continuously push this notion of unity and of the Afghanistan we're about to lose if we don't
Hmm.
be united. So it's really about strategic voices of reason, not emotion, who collectively come together and say, if we want to stand up for a republic, this is what we need to be doing. And that's what I'm hoping to continue to do so. But also, a lot of these people who are very antagonistic or who have very
Hmm.
polarizing positions, they really probably will never actually do anything conducive for Afghanistan. They feel very comfortable with tweeting, but are they actually going to go there, like, lift up their sleeves and work? No, they're not going to, because that requires diplomacy. It requires teamwork, and it requires you to work with different groups. Like, Kabul is not like Lebanon, Beirut, where it's like little ethnic enclaves. Kabul is like different ethnicities and different groups. Maybe the only one is really Barchi in West Kabul, is the more like Hazara prominent areas. But a lot of those areas are filtered with different kinds of ethnicities, and that's because we learn to work together and to build respect with one another. And those voices need to come together now. So I think those people who are very divisive and who try to make very antagonistic points, they're never actually going to go out there and work and do something for our country. So I don't think we should be giving them so much
No.
attention, even though it hurts and it's really frustrating, especially when you're trying to advocate and speak out against atrocities. But these people are just looking for their 15 seconds of fame. The more that they anger you, the happier they are. And that's why I very rarely respond to messages because or comments because you know, if it's not conducive to me, it's usually like I want to make
Yeah.
her angry right now. I'm going to say whatever I want to upset her. And they're going to do the same for you and for others who want to fight for a better future. So the best thing is to ignore them and also um, we know what's
Yeah.
best, and I trust that. I really do believe that. So it's about using our knowledge, being very, very smart and intelligent and strategic, and trying to think with our heads rather than with our emotions. It's difficult. It's our country. But Talibs are playing a very interesting game. They're spewing misinformation, disinformation, even though they know that it is
Hmm.
absolutely fake. But it's because they don't care what we say. They're moving forward. We need to be the same. It doesn't matter what pro-Talib people say, or the lobby or whatever. It's about how do we collectively push past and how do we fight against that. And that requires a lot of strategy and intelligence and patience. So I hope that those who listen and who truly want a free, democratic Afghanistan to think with their mind, utilize your intelligence, utilize your skills, because the Talibs are doing that, and we need to do the same.
Absolutely, and that's why I mentioned it here rather than I don't give them attention. We shouldn't give them attention on Twitter, and because then you're feeding into that discourse and you're giving them more fuel. So I mentioned it here because they're probably not even gonna listen to this anyway. So at least this is for the people, for those rational people, for the educated people, for us as a reminder for ourselves to not fall into those traps, to not make those mistakes. And with that,
Yeah, I don't think a pro-Talib is going to be listening an hour into a pro-resistance.
no, you don't think so? Oh man.
No,
We'll just
no,
inbox them. We'll
definitely
send
not.
them.
By the first 10
I'll send
minutes,
them the
they're
link.
out.
We'll send them clips. Maybe they'll listen. I don't know.
Yeah, clips.
All right, that's it for me. Kamel John, do you have anything to end it with?
No, I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't have said it any better myself. So, thank you guys for. But Sarajan, if you have any closing remarks, please go ahead before we call it wraps.
No, thank you so much. It was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope this just sparks more conversations. And it's nice that we all come from such different backgrounds, because this is exactly what needs to happen. Is that three very passionate, Afghans can come together and speak about how can we unite and how can we support movements of change, and that's exactly what I think we need to be sharing. So I'm really happy that we were able to speak, and I hope that this just starts other conversations about the Afghanistan we want to see in the future, and how we need to work together to make that happen.
Very well said.
Absolutely.
Very well said. Thank you. So, with that being said, that's all from me. And Kamel John, please, final remarks. Just end this, and we'll let everyone go.
No, I don't have anything else to say except for thank you, Sarajan, thank you, Zubairjan, and thank you to all of those who actually do tune in and are watching. Um, and yeah, we'll be back, of course. And definitely, we've gotten a promise from all of our former guest speakers. So actually, before ending, Sarajan, there's plenty of more questions we actually have, and I'd like to discuss with you
Yeah.
a few more, some of these nuanced discussions. Can we get a promise out of you to return to Radio Resistance for a part two
Of
sometime?
course.
Okay.
Of course, I'm sure there will be many interesting stages of what happens next in the months, years to come. So I'm sure this is only the beginning. So I will definitely love to be back and talk about what's happening.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again, and for our viewers, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. All the usual. Thank you very much.
Thank you.